edit if it's all right.
And
So you're asking me how AngkorHUB as like how everything has started, right?
yes, exactly.
So basically I was having a kind of 9 to 5 job like a lot of people. And I was working in tech, ICT since '97, so quite a while. Um, and I was just fed up with the rat race, and also I knew I was an entrepreneur, or um, it, this was resonating with me a lot to be an entrepreneur, and I was always having side businesses, or like still have your day job, but you work on evening and weekends on your project. So I've been doing that for a long time since I'm in IT basically. So I was burning the candle by both ends, and I was just fed up. So I don't know what happened. I was in a privileged situation. I was working on the French Riviera, south of France, perfect weather, in an amazing site called Sophia Antipolis. It's like you have business buildings, in the forest, with nice curvy roads and everything. It's unreal, right? They call the Silicon Valley of France. So I was working there in a good team. Everything was so perfect, but my mind, for me, it was not perfect. So sorry. Yeah, okay. Bye. So in my mind, I was more like, in having like anxiety, depression. I used to have panic attacks. So I was not, enjoying it. And when you're kind of depressive, I was not really depressive, because I had like, good friends and good people around me, but I was just like so exhausted about that work. So I just had this inner energy to quit everything, and that's why I'm giving you the full story, because it matters to me. That part is, I had this energy that it's kind of a in Neo in the Matrix when he said like no, and then he's like fighting with one arm, like it was almost like that. This inner force that is my mind or my body, was they were just on automatic pilot. It's like, okay, it's over. It's just over. So I called my boss, really blunt, like, okay, I'm finishing in 2 weeks, and it's like, no, you need to give a month. I'm like, no, if I go see a doctor, they will put me on leave, and then it will be worse for you. It's like, okay, you can do it then. And then that was it. And then I went to see HR where I was, because I was assigned to a client, which was a big company, Orange Telecom in France, and and they were super supportive, like, oh yeah, me too. I went around because I wanted to go around the world, doing a trip and a test. And they're like, yeah, I've done this a year ago, for a year, and it was amazing, so please do it. And so everyone was really, really super supportive. So anyways, long story short, so I took a one-way ticket, and I wanted to go in Asia for a while. I went to like Thailand, but years and years before, like 10 years before. Um, so it was like part of my itinerary for sure. Not Cambodia though. So I was supposed to go to, well, I went to Vietnam to join some friends that they were traveling as well. So I really enjoyed that. And then I didn't want to leave, but I had my other tickets. So I went to Hong Kong after I've stayed there a month. I have a friend living there, so I was lucky as well. And then an old friend say, hey Jeff, I have a project in Hanoi. Do you want to go work on it? And it's related to immigration, to Canada, and they need like a database and system and business development. So I'm like, okay, I will go there. I was happy to go back. It wasn't my excuse that I was looking for. So at that moment, I was still living on my savings, right? I had saved some money, and I wanted to do this test for 3 months to be away and see if I can be a digital nomad, and work remotely. So in Hanoi, I met a lot of people, and I started to go in startups, even networking. And then I met a guy who at the time was working on creating the first co-working space in Hanoi, well, proper big co-working space. Bobby, hi, if you're listen to this video one day. And then so we bouncing ideas, and I was inspired, but this project didn't take off. So the immigration project. So I've decided to carry on with my travel. So I went down south in Vietnam. I was in Ho Chi Minh, and I have a longtime friend who said, "Hey, I'm at Siem Reap by the beach. You want to, come to see me?" And I'm like, "Okay, where is that? I know nothing about Cambodia. Shame on me. Like, I knew nothing. Like, I failed all my history class. So so yeah, so I joined them by the beach, and this is where I was, working on different projects and working on my laptop, and I had a backlog with previous clients, and I was with my laptop there, and then MacBook, they have a glossy screen, so you're by the beach with the sun, you see nothing on your screen, and then not complaining, but sand on your keyboard, and patchy internet, patchy electricity. And I was like, this is not the dream. This is bullshit when digital nomads are like posting pictures by the beach. It's not comfortable for your neck, just the position and everything. I'm like, why
No.
don't we create a co-working space by the beach? So this is how the initial idea came up. So I'm like, oh, elimination, aha moment. And I start to dig. I'm like, okay, who can come, so what are the personas, and I knew these principles, and but also you have a kind of a how we call that, um, you validate your own thoughts. I don't remember the term, when
Yeah.
you're seeking information that would validate your own thoughts,
Yeah.
confirmation bias. Yeah. So I was, okay, we need that. Okay, I will do this. This my, my business model, my business plan, and then you're finding ways that the numbers are matching up, and like, okay, I will. And the first idea was I started to dig on the numbers, and I knew I wanted to have something like eco-friendly and nice, and try to be a responsible citizen or in a responsible business. So I want to do this earthship building, which is it's a nice principle, like and they call them eco building.
Yeah.
Um, so so I started to work on this business plan, and I was very excited, and I was started to compare the salaries of, like, for example, a webmaster or a developer in Cambodia versus in US or in Canada, and I was shocked. I see like how it was unfair, and I didn't know like the root of the problem or anything else. Um, Sorry, the cats are. I know.
They're active.
Yeah, they're like they found the food, and they're like doing some some crazy things to get the food. Uh, yeah, so I was yeah, shocked by these numbers, and I'm like, what can I do for that? So I'm like, okay, let's reuse the co-working space. So that was the initial idea. The business model is people will come to use the co-working space, most likely tourists or foreigners, and some locals. And with the same premises, we will give workshops for free for locals, so they can scale up.
Mhm.
Um, uh, and so I started to dig the numbers, and it was very interesting, and I was very excited, and I didn't know it was a social enterprise. And then my same friend say, "Hey, I'm going to visit AngkorHUB," because for him, he was on a backpacker trip. He was not looking for something to attach himself in Asia, like me, subconsciously. So I started to. I'm like, okay, let's. I will join you. I will go to Siem Reap. And at the time, it was the second poorest province in Cambodia, Siem Reap, and I think it still is, or almost, because the money from the temples are not necessarily going, or tourists going to the population in the province,
Mhm.
or only a few individuals. So I went to Siem Reap and started to work on my business plan, and then I met someone when I was there as well. So I really I enjoyed the time. I met some locals, like a tour guide who brought me in his village, and I see like rural schools, and all the reality that is are shocking you as when you're coming from Canada. You see all that is really um, yeah, it's really transforms you to see all that. So all mixed with this business project. that was enough for a confirmation bias, right? I was like, okay, I can do this, create some training opportunities, and it will be amazing. And then I started to really like Siem Reap. Um, and then I decided to create this project in Siem Reap, not by the beach.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was the really the story where the building block of AngkorHUB. And the first year I was located in the top floor of the Canada Bank building in Siem Reap, which is the only office space that you could find in Siem Reap. And lucky enough, they had like a generator and you know and a good location.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll let you ask some questions because
Yeah.
like the story continues, but that was just for the first month, the first brick, right?
Did you start this with by yourself, or did you also get some help from other people?
By myself. But by the
Yeah.
time I was already traveling for 6 months, not for three, and I was started to run out of money, and and I had Bitcoin, right? And they started to because I was an early adopter of 2011,
That's very interesting. Yeah.
so at $8, um, yeah, so I was really
Wow.
into
Wow.
yeah,
Eight
but not
dollars.
yeah, but not enough of them, right? Not enough of them. And eventually, and I sold a few, well, I sold everything actually. And over the years, because for different things, my clients were paying me in Bitcoin and I was reselling back and forth all the time. So I was never really accumulating them, even if I was believing in crypto. Um, you know, I even advise people and investors to buy Ethereum at $15. Ethereum now is worth like way more than that. Um, but but for me, I couldn't jump on the bandwagon myself because I was putting everything in this project, right? All the lack of clients or a business taking off, I was putting all my efforts and coding or small contracts to be able to support this project. Um, yeah, so I used my, I didn't have any help at the beginning. Uh, but I had first like two like members initially that they were really believing in the project, and it's just an anecdote. They saw the space, so we met in cafes. We work on some projects together, and they say, okay, they needed an office as well, and so we could, you know, share the cost. So they liked the idea, and before even seeing the space that I just found at the Canada Bank building, they wanted to commit for 6 months, and then they
Oh, wow.
so we went together and they saw the place and they're like, okay, we will do 6 months. And I didn't have any furniture. So they gave me 6 months, they paid 6 months in advance. Okay. And I took
Wow.
this money and I went to buy the furniture. So that,
They trusted
that
you. Yeah.
yeah, so that's funny. And then yeah, survival. And a year later, my lease was over. I just took a year. I could renew at the same rate. I knew, but I couldn't support this project anymore. So I had to find another location. And by the time I went to a co-working conference called CU Asia in Bali, and it was amazing. I met many other people in the same situation, and you start to see like the co-working spaces statistics at the time. So that was in 2015, after over a year of operation, and they already their global stats were like about 40% of the co-working spaces are breaking even, only 40%. So it's really low. But at the same time, the movement was getting traction because people like, you know, it's Instagrammable, you know, it looked good, it looked cool.
Yeah.
You know, it's exciting when you work together on the project and you meet other professionals, and the networking effect of co-working is extremely powerful. So for me, I became friend and I've done business with almost 100% of my clients in the past. So it was really amazing for that. So yeah, so a year later, I go to this almost a year later, I go to this conference, and I couldn't even afford to go there. I think I borrowed money to be able to go that even, but it was also my
Wow.
only holiday. So I went
Yeah.
there and it was amazing to connect with other people in the same situation and more or less, and to get support and to discover this sort of family. And and I met a guy who his name is Mark Kwan. He got a place called Onion Collective, and this guy was not part of the conference. And I was just going to work in this place, which just looked like a cafe, but he was building some rooms, and people were working there on their laptops, including me, because I couldn't go to Ubud in Bali, the most famous co-working space, because it was too expensive. So I go this place in the cafe, like the same thing that I'm trying to tell people not to do. Oh, come work in co-working spaces, don't go in cafes. But myself, when I was traveling, I was doing the same thing. Right? So,
Yeah.
so I've learned a lot from that. And then this guy shed some light. It's like, you need to do F&B, food and beverage. This is how you will pay the bill. It's not with your day passes. And so we like brainstorm a bit, and that's why I was convinced to drop my lease when it was ending and just go find a place where I can do F&B. And by looking for locations, I found that place with rooms on top. And I said, this is the perfect location. There's a kitchen, I can do F&B, there's a big garden, and I can live there and save money. And so, but I have no more money at that stage as well. So I have a friend who believed in the project, believed in the vision, and he said, okay, I will lend you some, but in exchange, I'm staying in one of the rooms. I'm like, okay. So he helped me, painted everything, and amazing help.
Wow. Yeah.
And by living there, and he was living there, we had an amazing internet connection at the time. It was 150 megabit, and probably the best connection in Siem Reap. Power generator, and like the co-working space underneath, and we're at our feet, and so it was amazing. And I realized, and even today, I'm very proud of that moment. I realized, like, why don't for me, this is the kind of place I would have loved when I was traveling. So why don't I create a package where people can stay with us and can use the co-working space? And this is where the co-living was born. And I've pushed more than that, because we were in a unique situation being in Siem Reap. So I said, why don't we pick them up at the airport with a tuk-tuk with a name sign, and we give them a SIM card on arrival, and we bring them to the co-working space, and everything included. Food is included, unlimited coffee and everything. So,
Oh, wow.
so I package that, and I think we're in the first place in the world, who have done that, hands down, for sure, because it took years before I even heard about other space trying to do that. And my clients, they loved it. And for me, and I'm sure Cheryl, maybe it's the same for you, but I don't know why it's or maybe it's not the same for you, but for me it is. When I land somewhere, when I travel and I see all the name signs, I'm always reading if I see my name.
I wish.
Exactly. Even if clearly my hotel will not do that, but it's a guest house or it's a hostel, but I'm still checking. Let's say it's a surprise from someone, right? Am I the only one, or you're reading it?
No, I just wish I was important sometimes,
So yes, I'm like, let's do that for my clients and myself. After that, when I was traveling, like short trips, go to Vietnam or other countries, and my same driver was waiting for me with a name sign. I'm like, wow, this is an amazing feeling. I always loved it myself, or even going to Phnom Penh and coming back to Siem Reap by flight. Let's say I had meetings or something, and it was just magical. Like the driver waiting you, and you go in the tuk-tuk, and 20 minutes later, you can have a Zoom call, in the space with your coffee. So it was beautiful. So the rooms were very modest, and we even have a dorm. And in that dorm, I had people who are like millionaires who came, and in the rooms as well, because this is a movement, digital nomads and remote workers. People, they love that. They want they want to be part of a community with, movers and shakers, entrepreneurs, and people like them. So they don't want to go, and some of them, they can afford five-star hotels, but this is not what they want. It's not resonating with them. It's so cold. You don't have this connection. Right now, you start to see more and more big hotels chains and people trying to do co-working, but they don't have community builders or somebody, an operator who's there. So there's no soul. So it's very different.
What kind of
Um,
entrepreneurs did you have in your co-working space that came in?
yes, yeah, you would think they are all like tech people, but not at all. So of course they're like a little bit overrepresented, people in technologies, developers, because it's easy. But I've seen people that doing accounting, um,
Interesting.
translation, what else? I think crazy things. Doctors, researchers, um, yeah, a lot of atypical things as well. Yeah, too many. But
And
it
many of
was
them were local or tourists. Like what was
tourists,
sort of the ratio?
tourists,
Tourists.
tourists. Yeah,
Interesting.
I had a few locals, but mostly Khmer living abroad, and one is like from California, and back and forth. He came back 3 times, right? So it was
Oh,
amazing to have like a Khmer American there. So he
yeah.
loved the food. He could speak Khmer, but with an accent. All my staff, they're like, oh, even me, I noticed his accent, right? So it was, but it was so nice, to hang out, and he grasped the concept, and he was happy to be there. So I had a
Yeah.
lot of returning guests, a lot, and I'm receiving again yesterday. I'm receiving messages, people connecting with me on LinkedIn. Oh, I still remember Cambodia. I want to go back, and as soon as I can go back, and I go, and I'm like,
I
sorry, the
remember
space
Jeff.
is closed. Yeah, so I really need to reopen because I had really like powerful memories. And you can, you know, I was giving the example of a cafe earlier, but
Yeah.
that was also my frustration when I was there. In a cafe, your barista is not a CTO, right? So he's not an entrepreneur unless he's the owner, and some exceptions, of course. But the people you will meet are working next to you. They are people that most likely you would love to network with, and they would love to introduce you to someone in their network. So I think it's very powerful. And you're with UNDP, but I see a lot of NGOs were doing that, and I had permanent members. They were from some NGOs as well. And actually, that was one of the first vision, was to have NGOs and social enterprises to be on the same roof,
Mhm.
under the same roof, um, because that was my vision as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and back to the initial thought about, now we're talking about the business side, but in terms of workshops, we have done a lot of workshops, and the beauty of it is the clients, the guests we had for co-living and co-working, they're
Yeah.
so excited to give training and give workshops and share their
Oh,
knowledge.
wow.
Of
Yeah.
course. So think about, in 2013 or 14, I had like early blockchain developers that on the real Bitcoin blockchain that came to visit me, like, and a lot of people like that. And those people, they love to share what they know, and especially when they discover Cambodia, just like me, during my first few years, and you're so amazed by people's smiles, and the situation, and you're also touched by the situation, and illiteracy rate and poverty and everything. And of course, as a human, you want to do something. So
Yeah.
so those people, they I have people, they come because we had only weekly and monthly packages, nothing per day. And
Right.
at a certain point of time, I let like the minimum to be 3 days, because but it ended they were ending up renewing all the time. But because at first, you don't know if you want to stay long, you never experienced. But I have people who came for 1 month, and they were telling me upfront, okay, I want to give workshops, I want to give training, and and they were giving me their interest, and projects and ideas, and I was organizing workshops around that. So I
Yeah.
mean, super qualified people, like for example, like Facebook ads. One of my now she's a friend, Joe. She was a marketing teacher. She's one of the top in Facebook ads, and we have given workshops together, and like a lot of them for free. And these guys, they're so generous. They're touched by Cambodia, and she came back three times after. And she will,
Wow.
as soon as she can travel, she will come back again. And those people, they pay their own fees, and they participate in the local economy because they go eat at restaurants or whatever. they're doing something with the locals and also with other entrepreneurs. So I really love that concept and principle. And from my learnings, I've came up with an idea of AngkorHUB 3.0, which is a little bit secret, but it's related to all my findings and experiences, and more with a business twist, but still with a social, like a, really like social values with a strong core. Yeah.
That does not say much, but
I will not say much. You know, I've seen, I've seen in co-working conferences big groups, like even from Dubai, representing investors or larger groups and everything, come to learn from community builders and co-working spaces of what they can do. Right. I've seen this, and with a few exceptions, where they call you and they contact you as a consultant, they're like, oh, I just need to put tables and chairs and a coffee machine and a good internet. Oh, let's do that. But actually, it's more than that. So yeah, so sorry, I cannot disclose too much, but of course, it's around capacity building, being eco-friendly, caring about the world around us. It's about work and life balance and remote work. So this is what I can say. We almost have done it before the pandemic. So I was supposed to get access to a 26 rooms 4-star resort in Siem Reap to build this project, but the deal didn't happen, and I'm thankful today that it didn't happen. But still, like I still believe in this vision, and I think it will be back, especially now the pandemic has fast forwarded all the remote work and digital nomad movements. Definitely.
Yeah. No, I love it. I really hope that more and more people become, I guess, more remote, right? Because now companies can't say, yeah, you can't work from home. Like, it could be definitely a mix, but if I was a worker or an employee, I could say, look, we just went through a pandemic. I worked from home the whole time and my performance was still good, So yeah, that's interesting. I guess for you in this co-working space, what were some of the learnings that you took away, whether or not like you had to change some things or features in the co-working space because you realized like some things worked and some things didn't?
Absolutely. I can answer from a really like basic business perspective.
Yeah.
Of course, don't compete with it's not about competing with the pricing of a day pass. It's mostly about everything that is around. Well, first, I will not do day passes anymore. I will just take commitment weekly or monthly. Another thing is physically the layout of your space is important. Because for us, we're at the ground floor, and we had an alley with no gates and no reception desk. So every time people were able to just walk in and interrupt everyone and and be curious and visit or something, which I'm not blaming them, but just in terms of layout, it was very disruptive for people working, including myself. So sometimes co-working and looking good on pictures, but to do deep work, it's extremely challenging. And I know Harvard, they have done some studies on that, and they had a podcast, like they have the Harvard Business Podcast, and then they had an episode on that, and I think there's a page around it, an article, but there are more and more research showing data that open spaces are really killing the productivity and deep work. So, but I think remote work is solving that. So you need a mix of everything, I think. So, and I've read, there's a guy who published, a Japanese guy, I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, but he started the first co-working space in Tokyo called Paxi. Um, his name is Satano. I probably don't pronounce it correctly. I spell it correctly. So is so its idea was, it was really open and community oriented, and it's like, don't just come at our space, go visit all the other spaces, and a few days of per week work in other spaces. So you check if it's the right environment for you. You get more network, more contacts, and you're changing your day to day, your routine, right? And I think I see a lot of people doing this in cafes, and which is great, but there's a link missing. So for me, that's one of the key takeaway is that the physical layout of your space is important for that. So people are able to do deep work. But co-working is also more than a physical layout. It's also about your community. This is a cliche saying that, but that's why some co-working spaces, they are still successful with virtual memberships. So they made platforms, and just to have access to all the contacts and chat rooms or whatever, they have their own environment and virtually.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so people can still be able to connect with others, and that's what people are paying for at the end of the day, as well as the space. Can I ask for your daily passes? What was the challenge? Was it just people coming and going? Business model wise, it just wasn't sustainable. What about daily passes didn't work?
Great question. So yeah, so basically think about it. When I've opened the first year, we're at like $15 per day. Then
Right.
So we barely had people. It was way too much. But I had, my charges in the building, electricity or whatever, they were accordingly, right? And then after I made like $10 a day, but no free flow coffee. But then eventually and when I reopened at the new location after my first year, and I'm like, screw this. I don't care. This is my own space. Like I use it. It's my office, because at that time I created an IT company to pay the bills, right? So I use my core skills and I started to hire staff and do projects. So that was our office as well. And I was living there, and I was like, okay, let's do my way. And I don't, and by the time other co-working spaces were popping up, so they always aligned their prices on mine. So I'm like, okay, screw this, $5 a day. So so it was very cheap. And then, but the problem with that is, think about it. I'm working on a software for a client, let's say, at a good rate, almost like a Western rate, and I'm doing deep work, and I'm in the zone, right? When you do coding, you need to be in the zone, and somebody is just popping up, opening the door, and it's just, and you see it, no laptop, no backpack. I was just walking around. I saw co-working space. I wonder what it is. I'm curious about it, or like, I work in a co-working space in my city back home. Now I'm just on a holiday. I was curious on what you're working on, guys. And for me, I'm like, yeah, start to talk, blah, blah. And then sometimes people are very interesting. Like you speak for 1 hour and everything. And the same is somebody's getting set up. The first day, you need to show around, introduce everyone, how it worked. Then they have questions. And then it took you a lot of time and interrupted everyone. And at the end of the day, in terms of profit on $5, it's nothing. So another key takeaway with that is like, if you have a reception desk and and people dedicated, that's their job to welcome the members, then there is no problem with that. On the other hand, the one of the core strengths that we had at AngkorHUB was, because I was there, and putting people in touch and networking and giving advice sometime, and a lot of back and forth. So if I would have put somebody doing just reception, would have been a different experience. But it's also the the challenge when you have a small company and you want to scale it, and if it's centered around yourself, you cannot scale, and it's also really demanding. You cannot take days off. So this is something that definitely will need to be different in a new revisited AngkorHUB, but also you want to keep your secret sauce, right? So if you have people recommending you to go somewhere, like right now on Digital Nomads groups, they tag me, they don't tag the space. They say, oh, ask Jeff. I went at his space or whatever, and in the reviews you see Jeff. So when they're coming, if I'm not there, the experience is very different, and I understand. So as an entrepreneur, you need to, to work on the business, not in the business, if you want to scale, and also preserving yourself. So this can be quite challenging sometimes.
How many, I guess, tenants did you have on average in your space every day?
Not that much because it was a small space. So about between 8 and 15, I would say, or let's say like high and low season between 5 and 15.
Okay.
So and we had one important thing is we had a community lunch. So we had a big round table outside, and then we had $2 like lunch. So we had a cook on site, and with vegetarian and non-vegetarian options. In the end, we were like, in the last 2 years, we're only vegetarian. It was way easier to manage. But we had amazing food. So many people are asking us to create a cookbook. Seriously.
What?
Yeah, we had like really good food. Like it was amazing.
Who cooked?
We had a Khmer chef.
Wow.
Yes, and yeah. So my girlfriend at the time, she gave a lot of direction for the food, and after that, my assistant, who's a foodie, and she's doing food tours. So we had like amazing inputs for food, and plus sometimes we had guests that they wanted to cook, so they're like missing having a kitchen, so they were cooking for everyone. So we had beautiful moments for sure. But I remember one time at lunch we had 18 people, so it's a lot to manage for a small place. But this is where the magic was happening, and this was one of the key if you pun intended, but the secret sauce was really that we having lunch together, and people that they were skipping it, they were like the day after, you can be sure they were there. So let's say someone was new in the community and at AngkorHUB, and they see like people, they're like, oh, it's okay, I will eat outside, and then they go under the sun trying to find a restaurant, and they're not sure about the experience, and then they came back, and we all like having fun, laughing at the table, exchanging stories or whatever. They're like, oh, I wish I would have stayed instead. So the day after, they were having lunch with us for sure. So, and this is where people were connecting. Oh, what you do tonight? Or where you travel next? Oh, when I was in this country, I went to this co-living space, and that was where the magic was really happening. And there were beautiful moments, and also other co-working spaces. So I said we're the first doing the airport pickup and packages, but very closely I have there's another space. I have a blank now. Okay. Well, there's one is called Hub Oyan. And this is in Hoi An in Vietnam. So they started to do after something similar, maybe 1 or 2 years after. So often they had clients that they were coming or going there back and forth. So it was really nice. And the other one is CoHub on Kolenta with my good friend James. And I met these people in the co-working conferences, and we had all like similar experiments. So we're sharing notes and sharing also the audience and guests. So it was really beautiful.
Yeah.
See my passion.
Wow.
I'm all excited.
No, I can tell. And I think all the little things when people think about co-working space, like you said, it's about having desk, coffee, like those are the basic that people understand what a co-working space is. But
Correct.
what you created is an experience
Yes.
where you have all these small things. And I think that relates to and this is what I was trying to kind of dig into to get out of this conversation as well, is because all of these programs, people have a perception as to how incubator is running. It's basically you have a few courses, you have mentors, you have potential funding and the network, right? But then there's small little things that make a secret sauce that people might not be able
Yeah.
to or
Correct.
understand. And it's the experience, like you just mentioned. But that's interesting. Are you combining all of these secret sauces into your 3.0?
Some parts, yeah, some parts, but there's a lot of missing thing, like new things. But yeah, um, the sneaky question. But yeah, so no, it's okay. No, some of them, yes, most of them. And it's funny because I've seen like over the years, people coming, they're taking a day pass, and they're taking a picture of everything, every corners and everything, and then you
Instagram.
see later on that these guys, they're like starting a co-working space, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It happened to me so many times, or people staying 1 week, but then after they opening their own space, right? So that was funny, not funny. Um, so that's why I'm also cautious. Like it's good to be open and community centric, but you need to have your eyes open as well as an entrepreneur. Um, I even have seen like VCs coming taking pictures because they investing in co-working spaces in Singapore. So they're like, no, I just want to check, and they're like in the doorway taking pictures, and they're leaving to take their flight. It happened to me several times, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, or one of the worst. Um, so uh, I've mentioned that we organize workshops. So we organized like several events with the locals, and so we created like good boundings with young entrepreneurs or developers, and we have given also coding classes. And I remember sometime there's a foreigner guy, he's arriving and open the door because we don't have a reception desk, right? So, and he's not entering because they know if they step in, they need to pay, right? So they just open the door and they sneak in their head. Like it's true. It's really what's happening, right? Opening. Oh, sorry, I don't want to disturb. I just have a question. Do you know any people coding games that they're struggling a little bit, like financially, and they will need to do like some extra, to the extra cash every month, so they could code on games for external projects. And I was so angry when that happened, because this guy basically he won some cheap labor for like a Western company, um, and
Wow.
assuming that they're not successful with their project, so he could hire them. So I didn't use the right words, but when he mentioned it, it was really a colonial attitude, and it's like, and
Ugh.
on top of that, of course, not contributing anything to us or financially or whatever. So I'm like, uh, you know, uh, I will not say it here, but I use some words like get away.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, so that happened, but as well, you could we created, speaking of events, this is also part of the secret sauce. We had something called hub talks. So it started to be a weekly thing that we are interviewing people, and we said like interviewing change. And so it was change makers, NGOs, social workers, entrepreneurs. So we interviewed a lot of people. So it was called Hub Talks, and then eventually it was hard to do weekly. It became monthly. So we had a really nice audience, like around 50 or 60 people every time. And in the end, and then we started to have more Khmer than foreigners. and it was so beautiful. And the last year that we have done, it was only in Khmer. And so yeah, and we still have some foreigners coming because they're supporting the event, and some of them because they were like fluent in Khmer. But for me, I'm not fluent in Khmer. I could understand a little bit, but that was it was not about me, right? It was when you do this kind of event and you see Khmer exchanging business cards and everything, you know that they're coming every month when you're doing one, and they're really engaged in the questions, and you see that this is, for me, this is a metric for success. That was really like, that was really nice to see that, and that's why I've done, like, they were 100% in Khmer. So we have done a lot of these talks, and yeah, recorded the few so on YouTube and Facebook. But yeah, this is one of the, like, this and like environmental awareness events and different type of events, and this is where you can see the added value. We
Yeah.
have made a huge one on gender equality. We had almost, I don't know, we had 70 or 80 people. So we had guest speakers and, you know, NGO workers, and you should see the engagement of the young Khmer and the questions, and you're like, damn, there's a huge need in this country to have these topics discussed, you know, where they can ask questions. Yeah, it was really nice.
How often did these events or workshops happen?
So the energy and the finances were like had, like, you know, a serious impact on that, but it was monthly, I would say. We used to have a weekly event, also a pop-up bar, so that was nice to network. So we had a tuk-tuk making pizza coming in our driveway on a Friday night, so we had some beers and we were chatting. So that was great. That was great. But again, this is another thing I'm talking about as a business. People were coming in. Sometimes they're like drinking before because the beer was $1. They didn't want to pay, right? So, or like there for the network and just not coming the rest of the week, right? So because you have all the same members and people coming that you can connect with without necessarily having to pay anything. So as a business, it can be tough, right? And you cannot have a few individuals bearing the cost for everyone.
Right.
But this is what people are used to. Talking about co-working spaces in developed countries, you have big spaces or big groups having, like, for example, I have a friend living in Paris. He never has to pay for co-working. All the co-working spaces going, they all free, from an insurance company, from a telecom company, and they have these events with speakers, with free pizza and free food. Like, you just pick your space every week, you have an activity. So this is creating like false expectations, I think. So when you have the same thing when you travel, it's not necessarily the same reality. Yeah, so I mean, if you want to have the co-working space that will be sustainable, of course, if it's supported by a project. I know in Korea they have a lot of, and I went to one of them, like they have these like huge, like several floors, like incubators and co-working spaces that they all free, supported by the governments or by the biggest banks. So this is amazing, but as an indie co-working space, it could be challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think, well, it's also like different co-working spaces. If you go to Raintree versus like AngkorHUB, they're two different, also like depending the type of companies, like how many people may want to go in, right? I don't know your
Yes.
future plans for AngkorHUB, but yeah, it's different depending on what you want to get out of it as an
Yes.
entrepreneur going into it. So what's different is the ones in Raintree are mostly there for a long period of time, whether it's a year or longer, I'm assuming. And there are those monthly ones. I think a couple of our cohort ended up just getting like 1 or 2 desks there, mainly for the networking aspect as well. But then if you want to meet people from around the world, then I would go to AngkorHUB instead, because those experiences to share are also quite different, depending what I would get out of it.
Mm.
Yeah. But I'm
Yeah.
excited. Year 3.0. I don't know what to expect, but it's
Yeah, me
got
too.
some secret sauces going in
Yeah,
there.
exactly. And it might also be in two different projects, but let's see. Um, I might do
Yeah.
like in modules, but yeah, I have some investors that are interested already.
Yeah.
And
Are
yeah,
you are you going to be in Siem Reap to open back up in
yes,
Siem Reap?
yes.
So you're going back whenever everything
Uh,
starts to open.
no, no, I'm still based in Phnom Penh. Well, back and forth. But
Yeah.
so I just mentioned that we might split in two modules, so two different in two steps, and or two entities is the proper term. And and one might be in Phnom Penh as well, to answer your question. So not around accommodation, but about a different concept. Um, so it's a mix of cafe and co-working. This is what I can say. So this part we will do in Phnom Penh and Siem Reap during this year, but the other part with accommodation that might be more later this year or even the year after. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah.
So depends on how it's going. But yeah, I have a serious investors around that, and I'm excited that we can do something. But yeah, Siem Reap is in my heart, but also in Phnom Penh, we might do something, but certainly not to compete with the existing co-working spaces landscape because the concept will be different. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you.
Um, but yeah, that's about it. I think if I do have any follow-up questions, I will ping you. In
Perfect.
terms of what we're doing with this information, so I'll basically gather it and section it off to be like part of AngkorHUB. And what we'll do is at the very back of the guidebook, we'll have all the different organizations that were obviously inputted in this. And
Okay.
this will hopefully be online. I still need to think creatively how we're going to format this. So, with we can link it to your website or your future
Okay.
that you may have. And I think based off of that Clubhouse conversation too, I was talking to Satya from my enterprise
Yes.
after, and yeah, like what Varak was saying, but also there's a lot of government regulations that are not creating the necessarily like the environment to help startups, or let's say they go into an issue, how do they raise this up to the government and whatnot? And so I
Yeah.
think as much as we wanted this guidebook, I think part of my output is to basically gather people to launch this guidebook and to validate like what they've learned or what things that to express their thoughts on what could be improved, maybe to help with AngkorHUB or whatnot, right? For
Okay.
example. But I also see this as an opportunity then to bring together not just entrepreneur support organizations, but entrepreneurs themselves in this room with the public sector. And I think that would
Absolutely.
be some kind of more of a productive initial start of a conversation
For sure.
to follow up on. So
If I might,
yeah, go please.
just quickly, because I have another call after as well, but
Oh
just quickly, if I might just add on your idea, is when I was mentioning there's a lot of, we had a lot of guests that they're happy to share, give workshops, etc. Is for me, when I see about the capacity building need in Cambodia, when I see some reports from the startup ecosystem that are saying that there's a lack of international mentors or and training or this and that. For me, I mean, I disagree. I've met many
Yeah,
people able to share, and they would love to stay here and share their knowledge. And if you are asking digital nomads to stay here and to have a proper visa, not workarounds with a tourist slash business or whatever, and be able to be here working on their business and sharing their knowledge, you will have a lot of them, a lot, especially now in the context. And I think in the pandemic, Cambodia, for people who are used to, they're like, wow, I wish I would have been in Cambodia instead of my home country. So there's a lot of people thinking about the brain drain in different like modern, like developed, so-called developed countries. A lot of people will want to be in Southeast Asia, especially Cambodia. So I think in terms of industry 4.0 and access to mentors for startups and talents and capacity building, I think we can have something with the remote workers and digital nomads, and AngkorHUB is extremely well positioned for that. And that's why, like, about 4 years ago I created the domain name nomadvisa.com, right? So I love this topic for many years, and I'm sure we can add value, definitely.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, okay. That's also great to bring up and to maybe put on a discussion as well from your perspective. So anyways, thanks so much, Jeff.
Thanks to
Let me
you.
do the recording after this, and